Welcome to the Free Library of Philadelphia. My name is Andy Cahan, Director of Author Events. James McBride has been called a modern-day Mark Twain and a consummate entertainer with the comic energy and antic spirit of Richard Pryor, and he's got the writing chops to prove it. McBride is the author of the National Book Award winner, The Good Lord Bird, and the New York Times bestselling memoir, The Color of Water, a black man's tribute to his white mother. His other works include Kill 'Em and Leave, Searching for James Brown and the American Soul, Miracle at Santa Ana, Song Yet Sung, and the short story collection Five-Carat Soul, for which he was last here. An award-winning composer, screenwriter, and saxophonist, he received the National Humanities Medal from President Obama in 2016. He joins us tonight to talk about his new novel, Deacon King Kong, which just a few hours ago made the New York Times bestseller list. Please welcome back Mr. James McBride.
Well, thank you very much. You like me. You really like me. I really feel so happy to see so many nice people here today, really. I'm sorry that I can't greet and meet all of you as I normally do, because of the current situation. But look, I've been on tour. I've been touring for books for 25 years as a writer. Like if E.E. Cummings were writing now, he would just quit, But the whole business of germs. When The Color of Water first came out, this was in 1995, and I was very grateful, by the way, when it first came out. It came to Philly. When I was in Philly when it first came, those of you who remember my good friends, some of my good friends here from Variety Club, Vinny and Lou, and they came. I was in the gallery, in the window of a bookstore, and they, David Preston, his wife, and they came, and they were maybe, I don't know, 15 or 20 people there, and signed books, and then I went on about my business, and then I wrote another book, and now, now when I show up, I don't know if, when you're a best-selling author, you don't know if your jokes are funny anymore. Because there was, James McBride said, ah. But anyway, during that time, after my book came out, my now ex-wife wanted she wanted the house of her dreams, which had 5 bathrooms in it. 5 bathrooms is a lot, I mean, you got one for the number 1, you got one for the number 2, and then you got 3 spare ones just in case any other feelings come. So I was always trying to roust up money. So anytime some kind of mixed race thing, or mulattoes or black right, they called James McBride. I was the guy, So I would take these jobs, and I'd come and I'd speak, and I'd say, we need peace in the world, love you, and they, thank you, and they'd pay me, and so that's how I kept my house with the 5 bathrooms. But so Louisville, Kentucky, at a certain point had a need for James McBride. We've got that beast. The committee did it. So I came to Louisville. When I got there, there was this in those days when you got off the plane, people were actually you could actually see, the people could stand there. So there were 3 people standing there, and the first guy said to me, hello, I'm Father McGonagall, whatever. Father said, nice to meet you. I said, nice, okay, cool. Then the next guy behind him said, I'm Rabbi, Shinanowski. I said, oh, nice, okay, cool. And then behind them was a little short black lady with curly hair. She was very cute. She was eating a bag of potato chips. And so the guy said, the guy who introduced himself said, oh, and this is Minister, Johnson from, said so Baptist Church. And she was eating, but she went like this. And she said, oh, Mr. McBride, I loved your book. And when she said book, a potato chip flew out her mouth. And, she was short. And how you, like in Star Trek, Scotty comes up to the captain and says, Captain, we've got to, no, get away, Scotty. Well, I saw it coming. And I whop right in my mouth. And then we all saw it, too. And so, I had to be a man. So I swallowed it. I mean, it wasn't too bad. It was kind of onion garlic. It wasn't too bad. I just... But anyway, so I have a little bit, kind of a little funny about the germ element, and so I'm sorry that I can't. And I've been on the road, for all I got the coronavirus and the Budweiser virus and the Toyota Corolla virus and all of them. So you don't really want to be around me too much. But I'm glad you came out, and I'm glad you you are enjoying or will enjoy this book. This book has a lot of local ties. Well, first of all, when I come to Philly, it's like my hometown. My mother moved to Philly when I was in college, so when I went to Oberlin. When I came back from Oberlin, I come to Germantown, Philly. Right on Green Street. Right, Wayne Junction was the train station. Yeah, you get off that train station at night, you start trotting, you start running. And it was like that for years. And apparently they fixed it up, but it still looks like that. As soon as you walk away a block from it, start trotting and just keep moving. But anyway, I came home from college that summer, and there was an ad. I was looking for a job. There was an ad in the paper. It said, cook wanted for a camp. We need a cook, So I went and answered the ad, and it was a white guy named Bill Saltzman, a white Jewish guy. He was an old man, and I said, we talked, and so we were talking. He was interviewing me about why I want this job, and I said, well, I'm a student. So at one point, he just stopped. He said, you know what, Sonny? He said, you're too smart to be a counselor. And he picked up the phone, and he said, I'm going to call Cy Friend. And he called up this guy whose name was Friend. He said, I'm going to call Cy. He said, Cy, I got a boy here. He's too smart to be a cook. He's too smart. He's a very smart boy. I want you to hire him as a counselor. And then he hung up the phone. He said, go out there and see. So I went out to this camp to see this man called Cy Friend, and the camp was called Variety Club Camp, where they had all, so-called disabled kids. And the first thing that Cy Friend said to me was, I'm sorry that Bill Saltzman used that kind of language around you, calling you a boy and all that. I didn't care what he called me. As long as he didn't call me late for supper, he can call me whatever he wants. But I said, okay, so he hired me at the camp. And, for the last 40 years, I have tried to write about Variety Club Camp, and I just can't. Well, I have there like 5 or 6 of my fellow Variety Club Camp counselors here. And I think the reason why I can't do it is because I'm not sure why. But it's important that I mention it with regard to this book, because I still have friends from that camp. Vinnie Carissimi's here, and Lou, and all the other people who worked here. That place was like, now you're talking 1975. It was like the United Nations. It was all kinds of people from all races, all colors. The Variety Club was started by basically Jewish theater owners here in Philly. And that generation of Jew, if you pardon my, if you're Jewish, I'm sorry, don't get insulted. Dominus honors, E plus honor. But that generation of Jew understood struggle that this generation of Jew probably does not. And so their willingness to give back to the community lasted for a long time, because Variety Club Camp was a great camp for many years. And it serviced all kinds of children from Philadelphia. They were of all different nationalities, all different races. And Cy Friend was so, so special. He was a gay man back in the time when you had to hide it. And I think every counselor on that staff, black, white, Italian, Irish, whatever, they knew it. Or if they didn't know it, it didn't matter, because he was just so special. And he's still alive. And those of us who remember him, we were so affected by his love and kindness. And it's all of the people that were there, some of that you see here, their work spread out into the world. And everything he did for those kids and for the people who worked for him just went into almost every facet of American life. The counselors became lawyers and doctors and attorneys and architects, and they spread all over the place. But I've never personally ever been able to write about it myself. I don't know why. But my attorney from those days, and my friend Vinnie Carissimi, the big Italian guy, he thinks he can play basketball, he really can't. But he and I talk about books all the time, and he recommended a book called Ovid, A Man Called Ove, or Uva, I think that's. And so when Vinnie's recommendations for books are pretty good. So I took a look at it, and I loved it. I loved the character. I loved what Fred Backman, I think was the writer's name. I love what he did with that character. And so this book had been cooking up in my head for a long time, and I was always trying to figure out a way to get into this community, to tell this story, and from whose perspective would we be told? Who would take us, who would march us through from the top of the story to the end? And after reading that book, I said, "This is I can find a black American version of of a man called Uva." And so that's how Sport Coat was born. So Sport Coat, now Sport Coat is not Uva. I mean, you can't compare. If you go have a book club meeting, don't say, read A Man Called Uva, and then read it, because then it won't work. But what's interesting about both is that when people become old, they don't waste time on stupid nonsense. We waste a lot of time on stupid nonsense, which means that we don't. And going back to the Variety Club camp, that was the place where you didn't waste time on stupid nonsense because the kids didn't. You never saw the kids yelling about, this one called me a name and that one. Well, they did, but it wasn't like the stupid kind of things that we get insulted. We live in a society now, like, if you make one mistake, like you say the wrong thing, it's done. It's over. You call someone a name, oh, man, that's it. Can't we just, as Rodney King said, between sips, can't we get along? And I don't mean to degrade the guy just because he was sipping the Georgia. Why not? There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you're buying, I don't have any problems with it. But anyway, basically, I'll read to you from the beginning, and this sort of sets things up. This book essentially is the story of what takes place in a housing project in Brooklyn in 1969. And it begins with the shooting of the worst drug dealer in the projects by a man who's affectionately known as Sport Coat, and he's also a deacon at the local Baptist church. Deacon Cuffy Lampkin of Five Ends Baptist Church became a walking dead man on a cloudy September afternoon in 1969. That's the day the old deacon, known as Sport Coat to his friends, marched out to the plaza of the Causeway Housing Projects in South Brooklyn, stuck an ancient .38 Colt in the face of a 19-year-old drug dealer named Deems Clemens, and pulled the trigger. There were a lot of theories floating around the projects as to why old Sport Coat, a wiry, laughing, brown-skinned man who had coughed, wheezed, hacked, guffawed, and drank his way through the cause houses for a good part of his 71 years, shot the most ruthless drug dealer the projects had ever seen. He had no enemies. He had coached the project's baseball team for 14 years. His late wife, Hetty, had been the Christmas Club treasurer of his church. He was a peaceful man, beloved by all. So what happened? The morning after the shooting, the daily gathering of retired city workers, flophouse bums, bored housewives, and ex-convicts who congregated in the middle of the projects at the park bench near the flagpole to sip free coffee and salute Old Glory as it was raised to the sky, had all kinds of theories about why old Sport Coat did it. Sport Coat had rheumatic fever, declared Sister Veronica G., the president of the Cause Houses Tenant Association and wife of the minister at Five Ends Baptist Church, where Sport Coat had served for 15 years. She told the gathering that Sport Coat was planning to preach his first ever sermon that upcoming Friends and Family Day at Five Ends Baptist, titled, "Don't Eat the Dressing Without Confessing." She also threw in that the church's Christmas club money was missing. But if Sport Coat took it, she said, it was on account of that fever. Sister T.J. Billings, known affectionately as Bum Bum, head usher at Five Ends, whose ex-husband was the only soul in that church's storied history to leave his wife for a man and live to tell about it, he moved to Alaska, had her own theory. She said Sport Coat shot Deems because the mysterious ants had returned to Building 9. Sport Coat, she said grimly, is under an evil spell. There's a mojo about. Miss Izzy Cordero, vice president of the Puerto Rican Statehood Society of the Cause Houses, who had actually been standing just 30 feet away when Sport Coat pointed his ancient pea shooter at Deems's skull and cut loose, said the whole ruckus started because Sport Coat was blackmailed by a certain, quote, evil Spanish gangster, end quote, and she knew exactly who that gangster was and planned to tell the cops all about him. Of course, everybody knew she was talking about her Dominican ex-husband, Joaquin, who was the only honest numbers runner in the projects, and that she and Joaquin hated each other's guts, and each had worked to get the other arrested for the last 20 years. So there was that. Hot Sausage, the Cause House's janitor and Sport Coat's best friend, who raised the flag each morning and doled out free coffee care of the Cause House's senior center, told the gathering that Sport Coat shot Deems on account of the annual baseball game between the Cause Houses and their rival, the Watch Houses, being canceled 2 years ago. Sport coat, he said proudly, is the only umpire both teams allowed. But it was Dominique Lefleur, the Haitian cooking sensation who lived in Sport Coat's building, who best summed up everybody's feelings. Dominic had just returned from a 9-day visit to see his mother in Port-au-Prince, where he contracted and then passed around the usual strange third-world virus that floored half his building, sending residents crapping and puking and avoiding him for days, though the virus never seemed to affect him. Dominic saw the whole stupid travesty through his bathroom window as he was shaving. He walked into his kitchen, sat down to eat lunch with his teenage daughter, who was quaking with a temperature of 103, and said, I always knew old Sport Coat would do one great thing in life. So that's how the book begins. And then it moves out. Basically, the shooting of this drug dealer, who's not killed, he's just wounded, causes a blowback that creates a kind of waves into the community. So we start to see the entire community. We not only see the projects, but we see the Italians that live just a few blocks away, and then we see the Irishmen and the Irish cops, and we see New York at a time when people were forced to live together and to be together. And that was one of the most wonderful things about Philly when I was a young man, that we were forced in Philly to live together and to be together, even if we did have people like John Street running around, and Milton Street. I mean, at least they were amusing. I mean, they were horrible people, but they were amusing, and well, I shouldn't say that. I mean, maybe someone's cousin, but they were interesting, and we were forced to deal with each other. It made Philly interesting. It made Philly a place where people actually had. Philly and Brooklyn are a lot alike in that regard, and they're a lot alike in the sense that what's happening now as well. That people are being moved out, and But the difference, I think, if you don't mind me just woofing and talking, is that there's a proud streak of social activism here in Philly, and the social activists here are very strong. I see Rondi Goldfein, head of AIDS Law Project, is here, and her husband David Preston, who's one of the editors at the Philadelphia Daily News. This is a place where people are proud to do good, and they come bare knuckle. They'll fight you. They take their shirt, they roll up the sleeves, and they go at it. I don't know that doesn't happen it doesn't happen with the same sort of solidity that it happens here in Philly. Sometimes it makes the city, a horrible place. I remember when ASCAP, I'm a member of the ASCAP Foundation, and what's the great composer's name? Anyway, there was a great composer whose name I can't remember. It begins with a T. Come on. No, he's not from Philly. He lived into the Stravinsky. What's not a T? I'm pretty sure it was Stravinsky. Stravinsky had a friendship with someone who played in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and he wrote a bunch of letters to this violinist. And these letters, somehow ASCAP had a hold of these letters and thought they belonged to ASCAP, but they were here at the Philadelphia Free Library. And so someone at the ASCAP Foundation said, those letters belong to us because we're ASCAP, the Society of Composers and Publishers. And one of the lawyers there said, I understand what you're saying. He said, but we ain't going to Philly to fight with the Philadelphia Free Library. We ain't going to do that. We're going to get our feelings hurt, and they're going to send us they're going to send us chucking out of town in a jalopy with not only without his letters, without our shirts. And they say, just forget it. So Philly has that reputation as well, and it's it's all good. But in any case, the book pushes into these neighborhoods around the projects, and we see a world where people still have learned that where people can still make mistakes, and where people have been forced to get along. One of the things about technology is it's forced us not to get along, because you can order your groceries from some grocery store, whatever. You can text you don't have to get along. So and the book is funny. It's because I think it's important to be funny. And it's important to forgive the past and, just let stuff go. So I think I've talked to about a half hour, and I'd probably be more prudent and beneficial to you to answer any questions. Just in terms of those who read The Color of Water, the three of you who read it, and I know there's only 6 Jews in the room, but I really feel My mother died in 2010, and she died at home in Ewing Township, New Jersey. She had a very good. She lived 88 years. She wanted to live. She thought 90 was possible, but she didn't make it. But she had a good life, and she was, she at the end there. She said to my sister Kathy. She said, "Am I dying?" And Kathy couldn't respond, but I said, "Yeah, Ma, you're dying, But I said, Jesus is, my mother was like the old school, When she converted to Christianity, she was, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. So I said, "Look, Ma, Jesus is waiting to say," and it kind of revived her, and she sat up, and she wanted to see my brother Hunter before he came. I mean, before she died, he had just gotten married. He was in Puerto Rico, and she sat up for 6 hours and waited for him, and then he came, and then she said goodbye to him and his wife, and then she died. So she didn't want to go to the hospital. She was always afraid tubes would be sticking out of her mouth and all that. I used to say, when toward the end of her life, I used to look at her. I say, people are going to remember her a long time, and she was of the generation that, like, if someone doesn't make a movie out of your book, it ain't no good. So she was like, "Yeah, it's just," but it's all right. I mean, it was all good. So, just blessed to be to have a great mother and to have so many great friends, some of whom are in this room. So, any questions now about? Right? Yes.
I'm not sure this question will interest the audience, but I was hoping while you signed the books that I brought with me tonight, I could ask you this at the time of the signing. And that is, as I was reading the James Brown book, for some reason it made me think of Laverne Baker. And Laverne Baker was probably the only woman, and not only woman, the only black woman, but the only black woman that was in rock and roll from like 1954 to 1960. And I was trying to imagine what her life was like during that period, with probably a lot of harassment and whatnot. And I believe she ended up having both her legs amputated before she passed on. And and reading your book, I could see that you knew, this sounds pompous, but you knew a lot about music, and you probably know who Laverne Baker is. And I was just wondering if, I would love, before I passed on, to read about her life, and if there was any possibility of that happening.
Well, that's very nice of you to say, but Laverne Baker was a pioneer, absolutely. But I did the James Brown book because they asked me to do it, and now I'm being sued because of it. And my attorney sitting right there will say, "Don't say another mumbling word about it." The only thing I would say is there's some horrible people in this world. And so I don't want to do any more nonfiction books about people. It's just too hard. I mean, also, like when you do nonfiction, look, if you can do fiction and you do nonfiction, then why do nonfiction? Because if you do nonfiction, you always, like, my sister told me, one of my sisters said, "Why did you say I was fat?" I'm like, what am I supposed to, what do you say? I love her. She's, my sister. Look, I love my sisters. I call them the power eaters. They're the power eaters. They eat for power, and not speed, not strength, power. And so, but she's a power eater for sure. So, but then, it gets into, and then she gets mad, and, so I'm not writing any more nonfiction books about anybody because it just doesn't, I don't need to. And fiction makes your dreams come true anyway. If you can do it, the great bridge between nonfiction and fiction, I think the reason why so many talented writers can't make that crossing is because journalism, if you do it long enough and you do it well enough, and it's been done very well in this city, if you do it long enough and do it well enough, cynicism starts to become your third leg. And, you become you become a cyclops. You don't see anything out of these two. You just see everything through the eye of cynicism. And cynicism doesn't allow dreams to come true. It doesn't allow characters to get up and move around. Skepticism is good. Cynicism is toxic to creativity. So I think that's why writers who try to make the crossing from nonfiction to fiction often have. And I always never felt very comfortable being a journalist. Mr. Preston, David Preston, who can, extremely gifted editor and writer here, can attest many a day I have offered the comment. I am no longer interested in the field of journalism. And then, of course, I go to whatever journalist job I had in the morning and just, I was a journalist for 9 years. I worked at the Wilmington News Journal, the Boston Globe, People Magazine. I covered Michael Jackson for People Magazine exclusively for like a year. During, I think he was on his first face at that point. I'm not sure if he had his first or second or third. I'd covered the Victory Tour right here and came to Philly. I think it was JFK Stadium or RFK Stadium. JFK Stadium, yeah. It was a great tour. And then I worked at the Washington Post in the style section. And then I quit and became a writer, Then I quit journalism and I became a musician for 9 years. I just worked in music. I did musical theater. I played a show on Walnut Street, the Lady Day show. I played piano, and then I got fired. I mean, I've been doing a lot. I've had a lot of living. I've done more living and learned more about life as a musician than I ever did when I was a journalist. Journalists, you go in, the phone rings. They say, "Hey, why don't you get? Okay, it's a gospel contest." And you say, "Okay," and they send you to cover the McDonald's gospel contest. It's not really how. I remember Ben Bradley when he was running the Washington Post. I wanted to do a story about a baseball scout, and I was walking through the hallway, and I said, "Mr. Bradley, I'm James McBride. I work in style." I said, "I want to do a story about a baseball scout, but I don't know if." And he said, "Leave right now." He said he looked at the newsroom. He said, "If I could make everyone in this room get out of here, clear out, I would do it." And that's really part of the problem with two problems with nonfiction journalism. One is that there's just people are not subscribing to Inquirer.com. And you want real news, but you're not willing to pay for it. And so local news here, which you get in abundance, you don't get as much as you used to. And the second part is that the great institutions like the Philadelphia Inquirer, the old Inquirer, which was the greatest paper in the 80s in America. I mean, when people look back on journalism and they will look at the roster of people who served at the Philadelphia Inquirer in the 80s, they'll see some of the greatest writers this country's ever seen. No kidding. A lot of them went on to and that was because of the editors who did look in the newsroom in those days. You go into the Inquirer, you go in with a pack of cigarettes, and you find yourself on a plane to Afghanistan that afternoon. That was a great place to work. But in any case, I got tired of journalism. I got tired of jazz. I got tired of traveling, and so I wrote The Color of Water. I wrote it on buses and vans, and I never told anybody I was doing it. I just did it, and then it came out. Then I became, the man you see before you today.
I read the book The Color of Water years ago, but here's my question. I have a niece, my nephew's her dad, he's African American, and her mom is white, and she has really big problems with her identity. But anyway, I really, in the back of my mind, wanted to give her that book as a gift because I thought your mom was really fantastic. Do you think that would be appropriate to give her that as a gift?
Yeah, I think so.
read?
I mean, especially because I could use the money. I mean, yeah. No, I think it'd be. Yeah, I think it's fine. I mean, this is the thing to remember about. This is the thing to remember about The Color of Water and my mother's story, and this goes back to Cy Friend and Variety Club Camp. It really doesn't. If you love somebody, it doesn't really matter, and they'll straighten out after a while. I mean, so look, there are lots of reasons why kids don't straighten out, and we live in an era when someone says, I'm going to spank my... If my mother would have gone to jail if people saw how she raised us. And you can say the same thing about Cy Friend and Variety Club Camp. They used to take the kids. If I'm lying, I'm flying. They would take them on 202 or 206. They would march 20 or 30 of them down the road. Look. And if you saw them, you'd say, call the police department, arrest all of them. Every single one of them, put them in jail. But you know what? Those kids never forgot. They would cry. When they turned 13 or 14, they would age out. They would howl and scream. And then Cy would keep them until they were 15, 16. Then he'd make them counselors at 17. And even if they couldn't pick up and carry a loaf of bread, they would just, because there was just so much love in the place. So back to the question. My mother left behind an extraordinarily wonderful history of Judaic life when she walked away and became a Christian. But she walked into a world of love. She left a world where there was not a lot of love in the house. But she walked into a world where there was a lot of love. And my father could have been an Arab from Saudi Arabia, or he could have been an African, or he could have been a man from Copenhagen, Denmark. He was someone who believed in love. And that's really what it is. Every single religion is the same way. I mean, I was talking about this with Marty Moscowane today. You know, I'm name dropping. Yeah. Oh, David Bowie gave me this watch. It doesn't work. But so I was saying to her, you know, Irish people are really funny, you know, because I was telling her, well, I did an event with Malachi McCourt. You know, Malachi McCourt, we were in Australia. And so I said to him, I said, look, I didn't know the guy, right? And he walks, he's a big guy. Whoa. I said, look, Malachi, maybe you might want to go first because I'm kind of funny. And, you know, he said, all right. And he was real meek. And he went out there, man. 3 minutes later, the people, women in the front, old ladies were weeping like, ha, they were laughing so hard. Then he came back and he went like this. So I often say to people, you know, if you want to, in a storytelling contest, don't monkey with an Irishman. Just find somebody else. But Marty was saying, well, Jews are funny too. And I said, well, that's true. You know, Jewish people are very funny. If you go to a Jewish community, there's nothing funnier than two Jewish guys arguing over the cost of like a brake job or something. It's just hilarious. But, you know, if you say this kind of stuff, you get, you know, you get, because black people, we're funny, so of course we're funny. So, I mean, you just have to like accept people and love people. So long answer to your question is that if this young lady is being loved by her parents, at some point the identity issue will fall away. It'll lock into whatever it is. Either she can see herself as a mixed race person, or she'll see herself as a black person, or she'll see herself as a person who's white, who's black on the inside, whatever it is. Because it really, in the long run, you and I know that it really, really doesn't matter. So, I mean, if you don't believe that, then too bad. But what else are you going to believe? You know, what else is there to believe? Think about it. I mean, if you don't believe that, what else is there to believe? You believe that, you know, that all this crap that, you know, Orangehead in the White House has been saying is, well, they've been praying for his destruction. Now the Lord done put air right on him. Mr. German just threw the air on his ass. Look at that. Boom. Now what's he going to do? I mean, so really what this is saying to us is that we are one people. We are one country, and we have to learn to forgive ourselves, forgive each other, and pull together. The captain of the ship don't count. He's in the basement. That's Captain Ahab, you know. And we just got to get the hell out of the way before Moby Dick comes, and let's just keep, you know, rowing, keep, you know, moving on.
Hi, so on your interview with Marty today, one of the things that I think you said was that you wrote this book from an Irish frame of mind. Did I hear that right?
No, what happened was I wanted to create an Irish character, or visit an Irish character, who, in New York, you know, because growing up, I knew a lot of Irish. I mean, you know, when you're a kid, you don't know you're talking to an Irishman who's working the subway booth, or that you don't pay attention to that. Only when you get older you realize. I wanted to visit that community that was near the housing projects where I was born, which is Gowanus houses, that area. That's where Pete Hamill and all those Irish people come from, Irish Americans. You know, the guys and a lot of these guys were, they were IRA guys, and they had fought against the British. They were very militant, and they were very hard-headed and hard to get along with. But if they liked you, there was nothing they wouldn't do for you. And so my godfather he stayed in Red Hook. He lived there all his life, you know, all my life. So I did a lot of like little jobs with him. He worked at Long Island College. He was a janitor there, and he had a lot of connection with a lot of the people he worked with. And a lot of them were Irish and Italian. You know, Irish, Italian, Dominican, Puerto Rican, and then later Asian. But that's what Red Hook and that area of South Brooklyn was. So I just wanted to find a character who represented that kind of funny, you know, kind of a little bit skeptical Irishman, and it turned out to be this cop named Potts.
What are some of the most important elements for writing a book?
Structure, I think. You have to structure your work. I think and consistency. You know, I write every day or almost, except when I'm touring, you know. And if you're not writing, then reading, you know. I'm reading a lot. I come into this library. This is a great library, by the way. I come and use this library all the time. I just duck in here and nobody bothers me, and, you know. I just walk in here like one of the homeless. I'm you know. But no, it's a great library, and I read a lot. When I'm not writing, I'm always looking for something new, some new character, some new story. But structure, you have to structure your story. And what I mean by that is that you're making sure that the characters can take you through the story from top to bottom, at least in fiction. That's why I mentioned a man called Uwe. You know, you read that, you see what that writer did in terms of structuring that piece so that it could go from, so it would power from top to bottom. And I used that, I won't say I used that same mechanism, it was the same, the strength of that character carried that story. So, structure and character strength. Yes?
Aside from that particular book, is there anything you've read recently that really just rocked your world, or an all-time favorite novel?
You'd have to ask Vinny about. I mean, I mean, you know, rock my world. That's an old. I like that. I read Eric Larson's Devil in the White City, and I really liked the book, but I just the violence in it was a little bit too much for me. Now I should say that I think he's extremely talented. I mean, really. And now I'm reading his book about Winston Churchill, and I'm also reading the follow-up to William Shiver's Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And of those three books, I would say William Shiver's book is my favorite, because William Shiver is he was just so far ahead of his time in terms of his. And I was mentioning earlier today that Eric Larson's book about Winston Churchill. So far, it says nothing about what was going on. You know, when Britain was trying to, it's over the course of a year that Churchill takes over and Britain declares war, or Germany and Britain fall into war. It's the day that Churchill becomes prime minister. Well, nothing in that book, at the beginning of it at least, talks about the moral issues that existed for Great Britain and the United States and the rest of the world, while these Jews were being murdered and slaughtered by the hundreds of thousands. Nothing, not a single word. And that was really the great lesson for me, because William Shiver talks about it in his book. It took a long time for him to get over the fact that he had burned a lot of oil not paying attention to what he was hearing about what was happening to the Jews. And so, as gifted as Eric Larson is, I wouldn't have written a book like that, which dovetails into another issue. And that is that we are really good in this country about talking about, I'm related to this, and, my mother's Jewish. What difference does it make if you ain't doing the job? Honestly, what doesn't make a hill of beans difference if you're not doing the job? I learned that in part in the James Brown book and also in life, And the real problem is that the people who really do the jobs, we never see them. We don't see them that much. They're not the ones that we pay attention to. So teachers make $30,000 a year to start instead of $100,000. And a guy who can add crib notes because he can do some kind of technical, legal mumbo jumbo walks out of UPenn and makes $350,000 after 4 or 5 years. And or we have a president of the United States who's a graduate of Wharton Business School. How did that happen? I mean, geez, this guy can't even spell corona. Now, how did he get out of Wharton School of Business? Well, I mean, let's not waste time on negativity, but my point is that, well, we have to look to we have to look to the wider picture. And the wider picture is that we should not be ashamed to help poor people. We should be ashamed to say, I agree when someone says, I think we're treating brown-skinned people horribly. We shouldn't be ashamed to say it. And we shouldn't, on the other hand, we shouldn't just say to someone, just because you voted for Trump, you're a moron and an idiot. I think that's stupid, because a lot of Trump supporters are my friends. And I call them at 2 o'clock in the morning, they'll show up. And so we have to agree to disagree and stuff. We got to pull them along. You can't, yes, of course we got to win. But we have to be like, Muhammad Ali. You beat him down for it. Then you grab him by the collar and say, thanks a lot, let's go. Well, Ali didn't do that, but maybe. Actually, he didn't do that at all. But we have to be like that.
I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say thank you so much. I heard you on Fresh Air yesterday, and then again, I think the next day. And when I heard you speak, you did something to me like Obama 15 years ago or Mayor Pete recently. And I just wanted to say thank you. I really, really appreciate what you bring to the world, your knowledge and your joy. And I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it.
That's a plant, folks. That's a plant. No, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Did your mother not find love in her household filled with Jews, or did she would not find acceptance? And why did she find so much acceptance and love in Jesus?
Did you read the book? If you read the book, you read it a long time. Well, look, no, she didn't find love. Her father was a very, strict and cruel person. But yes, her mother loved her very much. But if you say you didn't find love in a house full of Jews, come on. I'm too old to have these kinds of conversations. Jews love just as much as anybody else. And Jews have no monopoly on perfection, nor do they have a monopoly on love. It's just love doesn't care. Love never dies, and it doesn't care. So she found love in a man in 1941 that was like from way across the tracks, and she went with it. And it worked out for her. Now, we have a problem now. We have people who are born men and decide to be women. How's that? In my church, when you say that, people, they're just like, boing, what? Boing, they can't handle it. But how does it hurt you? How does it hurt your feelings if someone decides they want to be something else? If someone wants to be, gay, what difference is it? I mean, it's not hurting you. It's hurting your religion. Well, then find another religion. And if you really feel so bad about people who are not like you, don't live in Philly. If you go to Montana or somewhere, there's all people just like you. They're running around, they shoot moose and deer and stuff. It's great. You have a great time. But I just don't see, like a word like tolerance is just not even relevant here in Philadelphia. The home, which was the place where people who were running from slavery ran to. And people who, white and black, risked their lives so that people would be free. So words like tolerance don't really count. We have to adopt a new vocabulary for how we talk to each other. And also, I think everyone should take $10 out their pocket right now and just pass it forward, because I'm giving you very good knowledge. This is good stuff. You can take it home. All right, well, next question. Yeah.
Hi. I heard you say many years ago about your book, Song Yet Sung, that you didn't think it belonged on the history shelf. And there's so much history in it. And I was curious as to how you came to that conclusion. You had anything from maroon communities, fugitive slave law, free black community in Philadelphia. There was so much history in that book, if you cared to look. And I wondered why you thought that.
Well, in those days, I drank better whiskey. And no, I really, what I guess I was trying to do with Song Yet Sung, which 8 people read, and I have 11 brothers and sisters, so that means you're a special man. You made this is a great man here. This is a great man. He deserves a raise on his job. But no, I mean, when I wrote Song Yet Sung, I was trying to really emulate, or I was trying to show people what Harriet Tubman's life was like, and most people didn't get it, But I didn't want it to. I try to write books that bring people into the narrative of history without calling it a history book. That's what I meant. The Good Lord Bird was the same thing. I wanted people to know who John Brown was without saying this is about John Brown. And similarly, even with Deacon King Kong, I wanted people to know this is what Brooklyn was like. This is what the '60s were like, without saying, Robin Moses destroyed New York, which he did. There are books about it that written was a greater effectiveness than. I mean, Robert Carroll's book about Robert Moses are just amazing, and his books about Lyndon Johnson. I mean, he's just the best there is. So I just think writing as a commercial writer, you're trying to bring people to parts of history that they don't pay attention to. That's what I meant. I didn't realize this was being podcast, so I might have said some bad stuff. I take it all back, and I sincerely apologize to anyone.
I have a serious question. Do you think Spike Lee is going to become a Nets fan or stay a Knicks fan?
Well, unknown factor. Probably, if I had to guess, he'd probably stay a Knicks fan. Yeah.
I know you had said that that you would never write about a person that had died, or because you wrote on James Brown, you getting sued. But for me reading, and my mom, my mom introduced me to you. Mm-hmm. I just think your perspective to me. I know you probably would do it, but say if somebody came to you and they said, would you like to write your perspective on Dick Gregory? Would that be something that you might consider? Because I just think the perspective that you would give on Dick Gregory would be amazing to the world. Just my opinion.
Well, that's a very good question, because I was talking to Sonny Rollins about Dick Gregory. The great Sonny Rollins is still alive. I talked to him, and he's so smart. And he was a big fan of Dick Gregory. He sent me a CD of Dick Gregory like about a month ago. I think there were probably other people who were a little more qualified to write about Dick, like maybe his children, people who knew him better, who spent a lot of time with him. But I think that of all the entertainers in the last 50 years that were comedy entertainers, Dick Gregory was by far the most important. Really, he was extremely, people don't know. Dick Gregory's story is this. He was the biggest black comedian in America in the early 60s. He was a big fat guy, and he was very funny, and he gave all that up to become basically a civil rights activist, and he did it all his life. Now he would say stuff that would really cause a lot of us to lose our jobs. And some of his theories I didn't necessarily agree with. I thought sometimes he would go just a little too far. Like he said he saw, what's the movie about Django? He saw Django, and the guy shot he's a slave shooting white folks, and Dick Gregory said, I saw it 65 times. And he really didn't see it 65 times. He just was so, but he wasn't a person that had a lot of hate in his heart. He was a very good person. He was extremely smart. I wouldn't be the guy to write a book about him, but I think that there should be a serious book about him, because he was, in a lot of ways, his journey is undocumented. It's like Laverne Baker. There are some people whose journey is simply, but there are other people who are not black who have the same issue, like Mickey Katz, for example, who's one of the great, klezmer artists in America. People don't even know who Mickey Katz. Mickey Katz was super. There was a group called the New England Conservatory Klezmer Ensemble who came to Philly years ago, because I had a friend who played clarinet, and they came to the WYCA. Is that the YWCA? Is that still there? Oh man, they turned that place out, man. You had people doing handstand. They were, it's just the quality of that music, and also the expressiveness of Yiddish music is something people just don't pay attention to. And a lot of it was developed here. We have so much great culture and stuff in this country that we just don't pay attention to. Mickey Katz would be someone. Mickey Katz wasn't like Dick Gregory, but he was an important figure in music that most people don't really know that much about.
In The Color of Water, one of your sisters and your mother became estranged, and I was wondering if they ever came to a resolution, and more generally, the effect of that book on your family.
Well, yeah, my sister Helen and my mother became very close, and when my mother was sick, Helen was the one that she would turn to. Yeah, they became very close. That period lasted, not long. It was long enough, but and the effect of the book on my family, it was at the time it was profound. I had a brother who used to say, my brother David, he used to say, why don't you just give up my Social Security number 2? It's 4572. No, give up my credit card number 2. It's 2. And I said, look, with a $300 credit limit, $300 credit limit, nobody's going to be buying a Jaguar from Macy's with your credit card, buddy. But most of them were cool with it, and most of them were, they don't talk about the, they never really. After the initial burst of attention, my mother didn't make a big deal of it, so my siblings didn't either. She got a lot more. She always had a new car. I always tried to do my best to take care of her. But the fact of the matter is, she was taken care of by all her kids. She never needed anything after after we became big enough to make money and help her out. So I have one brother who's just like, one of my older brothers. He's just, something's wrong with him. But most of them are pretty cool. Look, I have Jewish family I've gotten to know, and some I haven't gotten to know, and so it works. What are you gonna do? You can focus on the negative or accentuate the positive. That's it. So the effect has been pretty good. I would say overall it's been pretty good. if I had to write a book about my family again, like there was always like the pressure to do, Color of Water Part 2, and the Color of Water redo, but I wasn't one for writing the same book over and over again. Because a lot of writers do that, as you know. They write the same book over and over, and they say the same story with different people, and.
So I just wanted to ask a pretty straightforward question.
All right.
What's the most important advice you've received or you have for like aspiring writers?
Rewriting. I would rewrite everything. I still rewrite everything, even letters. I rewrite everything. I would say that's probably the most important. And also being able to fail. Just remembering that it's all right to fail. Failing is important, and you fail and you fail better. When you look at my books, this is amongst my few successes. Most of what I do fails. I just forget all about it and move on to the next thing. So, failure and rewriting. How old are you? Wow, man, that's impressive. What's your name? What? Scott Blender, like in the kitchen. Remember that name, okay? Scott Blender, like in the kitchen. He said, I'd be like, this is a great book. He'll be blurbing my books. He'll be like, James McBride, he's finished. He's really old, but just read this book for him. Scott Blender. Hey, come on, he's an old folks home. Come on, please read this book. I laughed, I cried. Scott Blender. All right.
I absolutely adored your book, The Great Lord Bird, and I wanted to ask you a question about it, and that was that your depiction of Frederick Douglass, probably the greatest hero of, and you made him into a total buffoon. I mean, I laughed all the time. But why did you do that? And was there a sort of reaction to that?
There's always one. There's always one. Well, you know what? It was just so funny. That's all. It was just so funny. The reason why I did it was because those of you have, Good Lord Bird is about a boy who poses as a girl, and he's following John Brown around, and then he meets Frederick Douglass, and Frederick Douglass gets plastered, and he tries to sleep with the kid, and Frederick Douglass is saying a lot of funny stuff like, I love country girls, and all this kind of stuff. So it just was so deliciously funny. I'm not a person who really likes your basic fancy pants type of person. And, when you look at Frederick Douglass, he's very, yes, aha, really, I don't like those kinds of people. They're just, I just ain't the person to be around those kinds of people without cracking a joke.
Your depiction of him.
Well, that is not good. That's not good. It's just, that book, just by the way, that's caricature. Frederick Douglass was a great man. He was a great man. He was a great leader. But the truth of the matter is that he was a politician more than a doer. John Brown was a doer. And so when John Brown went to Frederick Douglass and said, I'm going to attack Harper's Ferry, if you come, the Negro will come in droves and waves. And Frederick Douglass said, buddy, that one, that's yours. That's called you're singing to all the girls I loved before on your own, because I can't, that's a song I cannot sing. And so Frederick Douglass didn't go, and John Brown went, and he was, he ended up being hung. But, I mean, John Brown changed America. He brought on the Civil War. Not that that's a good thing, but he did, if we had waited for Frederick Douglass to speechify and abolitionize, we'd still be sitting here now, eating curds and whey, waiting for the big change. And sometimes you just need the change. And I'll close with this. We have some difficult moments ahead. Everybody knows that this, and everybody's freaking out. And I got the sniffles myself, and I don't feel that good. But I'm glad that the bell has tolled, that the clanging of the bell is being heard. There was a guy named William McCaffrey. He was the head of the 92nd Division, Buffalo. So he was the father of Barry McCaffrey, William McCaffrey. And when I used to interview the guys from the 92nd, the black soldiers, they used to say, I hate Ned Alman. He was the general of the 92nd Division. This is during World War II. He can't stand. I hope he died. I couldn't. They hated him, but they would always say, but Colonel McCaffrey was a good person, and that was a guy named William J. McCaffrey. Well, I found he stayed in the Army. He became a general, and he ended up, commanding a lot of forces and so forth. But when he died, he requested, and he asked for and got 6 African-American soldiers from the 92nd Division to stand at his grave and give him the old, heave-ho and that meant a lot because these guys were, They were very militant, and they were smart, and they did not forget how they were treated during the war. But when I was touring with that book, I went down to some fort somewhere, and I was sitting in the door, and I was sitting in. Nobody came. I was just sitting there, and the door opened, and the guy came in with a walker, like this, and it was William McCarry. I had only spoken to him on the phone. I had talked to him on the phone like 10 times. I'd never seen him. He didn't say he was coming. He just came walking in, and we talked for about an hour. And he said something to me I'll never forget. He said, "Look, we've been through a lot in this country." He said, "But we survived the Civil War. We'll survive anything else. So just steady as she goes. Stick for what you believe in, and everything will be all right." He said, Ned Almond and I, the general that was his friend, who was the commander of 92nd, he said, after he saw me commanding black troops, he never wanted to speak to me again. He really wasn't. He didn't want to be my friend. He said, but some friendships, some things just have to be the way they are. And it was time for the black soldier to become a member of this nation's army. And I just happened to be lucky enough to be part of it. And he said it was one of the greatest things I've ever done. He said, I was a racist most of my life and still am. This is McCaffrey talking. He said, but it changed me. It made me better. So we have to work on making ourselves better. There's a great illness upon the land. We're plagued with a great illness where compassion is no longer in vogue. But, it doesn't take any courage to pull out a gun and pop somebody. It doesn't take any courage to say, oh, they're taking the job. Those are the cowards. The true leaders are the Cy friends, people like Cy Friend who step forward and say, I am a man, and I'm the kind of man you might not like. I'm not the kind of man you might not respect, but I know who I am. So we know who we are. So let's take this country out of this illness when the time comes. You'll all have a chance. And when your chance comes, step up and do the job. Nobody's going to thank you. But that's how it works. So on that very serious note, thank you very much.